A shooting outside a Bronx barbershop. It happened May 30th on Jerome Avenue.
We're following breaking news. An officer and a teenager shot while wrestling over a gun.
A known gang member, according to police. And get this, that shooting that happened between him and the officer, they were shot by the same.
What the Bronx stood out for in the eyes of the vast majority of people is the fact that it's the cradle of our favorite music genre, rap. If it wasn't for the Bronx, who knows what the hip-hop community would look like today. However, it's also a neighborhood well known for the ultra-violence it's been tearing it to pieces, especially in the last couple of years. So what deadly truth lies behind Bronx's most lethal gang war? Even though the borough of Bronx, NYC is experiencing unprecedented scenes and acts of violence, all thanks to the drill rap movement, it's not the place where the movement originated from. The place which gave birth to this one-of-a-kind subgenre of rap is actually Chicago, Illinois. During the late 2000s, Chicago spawned some of the most aggressive and gritty rappers known in the modern era of rap. Names like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, Fredo Santana, and plenty of others all came about from the streets of Chicago. Chief Keef was the one who single-handedly opened the door to a lot of rappers who found drill rap appealing and built their own style from there on. The hit single, I Don't Like, formed a whole generation of young people and their way of thinking. But the drill movement didn't stop there. It spread pretty quickly all over the states, even reaching the UK and other parts of the world. Before you knew it, youngsters all over the Bronx were trying out new styles, and drill rap became a strong presence among the upcoming rappers, especially since this new style of music resonated with a lot of people who were destined to grow up witnessing gun violence, gang wars, crime, etc. You see, drill rap came out as a result of young people who were faced with little choices. Either you would embrace the life of a gang member, or you would face dire consequences. The rap lyrics come from the minds of these rappers were nothing short of a coping mechanism against the harsh reality that street life brings. That being said, it's no wonder that like-minded people who enjoyed drill rap quickly gathered around and started forming groups. Usually, groups were formed based on the neighborhood in which you grew up and made connections. People from the same block, or sometimes even just one building, would come around and start hanging out. This was the inception of a lot of gangs and everything else that came with them. First of the two major gangs prominent on the streets of Bronx is the gang called YG, short for Young Gunners, and the gang formed somewhere around the year 2003. As is the case quite often, there are other smaller gangs included in YG, such as the YGFC, or the Young Gunners from Cortland, who are based on Cortland Avenue. Most of the members associated with this gang were either from the Mott Haven houses or the Patterson houses, all huge project buildings. The leader of the YGs was a man called Jutha Perez, aka Jew Hef, and he was not only a known rapper, but also an authority figure in the borough of Bronx. A lot of people know Jew because of his close relationship with French Montana. Keeping a big group of people united for a long time is a pretty demanding task, one that Jew Hef didn't stand up to. Unfortunately for the future of the whole Bronx, the relationship between two of the higher gang members, Jew Hef and Melly Mel Bala of the YGFC, fell apart after Jew allegedly double-crossed Melly. The result of it was that YGFC separated from the Young Gunners and formed a new gang called GFC, or God's Favorite Children. They would soon change their name into OGs, or Original Goons, and that name has stuck around until now. The OGs moved around the Melrose and Jackson houses, as well as the Morrisania air rights. The division between the OGs and the YGs spelled bad news for the two groups, and trouble between them has bound to happen. Finding exactly the point at which the gang beef started, it's rather difficult. There were a number of incidents that took place and may as well be used as a point of departure. Regardless, one tragedy that is usually picked as the breaking point is the death of 16-year-old Moises Laura, aka Noah Bala. On April 16, 2012, a group of YGs went out drinking and decided to go invade the turf of their now opposition, the OGs. What ensued was a complete catastrophe when the group decided to go after Noah and stomp him to death. In the eyes of a lot of people, this is where it all went downhill. Soon after Noah's passing away, Jew Hef, the leader of the YGs, would suffer the same fate. He was attacked in front of the Tropicana nightclub on 1060 Home Street in August that same year by the members of the Young Flybridge, and he was beaten badly. The injuries caused Jew to fall into a coma, and he died in the hospital several days later. Even though it was the Young Flybridge gang that was responsible for the passing away of Jew Hef, the OGs used this as an opportunity to humiliate the YGs. They disrespected not only Jew Hef, but this whole crew of YGs by on the murals that were held up in Ju's memory. Because of their reckless behavior, the YG members attracted a lot of attention from the government authorities. There were 2 indictments to their name between the years 2015 and 2016, and almost 150 people from the group were put behind bars. The indictment of 2016 was the largest gang takedown in the history of New York City. The fact that a lot of older gang members were put behind bars implied that there would be an opportunity for some new faces to get involved. This is what happened only a couple of years later, with younger generations operating on the streets and replacing the older ones that were incarcerated. Both the YGs and the OGs made way for new gang members to arise. In fact, a whole new third gang came up to the scene too, but we'll get to that in a minute. These up-and-coming drill rappers were arguably even more ruthless than those before them. This can be seen not only through their lyrics, but also through their wrongdoings, which they usually film on social media in order to get more attention. Let's first start with YG. Some of the more famous members of the YGs that stand out from the crowd are names such like D-Thang, Bando G's, Raji's, and Nesty Fly. The main drill rapper coming from the side of the OGs is Sha E.K., also known as Jiggy Man. Because of his musical influence, sometimes the whole crew of the OGs refers to themselves as Jiggies. But these 2 gangs aren't the only 2 making noise in the modern-day Bronx. As we briefly mentioned before, another gang arose with this wave of new generation rappers. It's called the Sev Side. To be fair, Sev Side is a huge avenue filled with a lot of gangs, with their members sometimes overlapping. Some of the gangs prominent in the area of this city are Mac Brims, X Money Bloods, and the Rollin' 80s Crips. But of all of them, probably the biggest names are K-Flock, B-Love, and Dougie B. The problem with the Sevside boys sprung as a result of distrust between the members. K-Flock noticed that E-Dot, a rapper who he had collaborations with in the past, had hung out with some of Flock's oppositions and smoked one of his friends. This was interpreted as a huge sign of disrespect for K-Flock, since members never do such things. Soon after that, the whole internet knew very well that K-Flock and E-Dot had nothing more in common. However, the next victim in this gang warfare didn't come from the Sev side, but from the block of YGs, and his name was Wu Lottie, whose real name was Glenn Cole. He and a number of other YGs were ambushed by a group of OGs who pulled up in a car and attacked him with knives, trash cans, and broomsticks. Wu Lottie was the first to be attacked since he fell to the ground as he was running. The OGs had no remorse, and they took his life that night. The YGs gave their response by making a diss track, RPT Buggin', in which they called out a deceased OG member, Esmerlin Torribo, aka Smelly. This is the first of many tracks that would make fun and humiliate deceased members. It soon became a trend for all the parties involved in the Bronx drill scene war. To nobody's surprise, the OGs pulled a trigger with the diss track of their own later on that year. The track was called Shoot or Get Shot, and it was produced by Sha EK, PJ Glizzy, and B-Dot, and it was all about dissing the YG gang members. The summer of 2020 saw a lot of young people lose their lives. First in the line was the 20-year-old Tyrone Mitchell Almodovar, better known as Ty Benji, who was shot and left for in a taxi cab. 2 days later, after he passed away, another 17-year-old known as B Diddy was also shot after an argument with two guys. He lost his life 2 days later in the hospital. B Diddy wasn't even part of a gang, but he did know some people from the OGs. This is likely the reason why he got himself in trouble. YGs took this chance and mocked his passing on social media. The Bronx never sleeps, and the crime is far from over. On September 12, 2020, Christopher Pagan, aka Yellow, was shot in his car. He passed away at the scene, and the 3 people responsible that were arrested were all members of the YGs. Clearly, this was some form of retaliation. The following year in 2021 was equally grim. The first tragic incident that happened on 7th of July was Typhool Daughtry, aka Ty Swish, associated with the YGs, got in the head and collapsed in front of his building. To make matters worse, the person who found him in his awful condition was none other than his own mama. The retaliation from the YG side took place only a few days later. The victim was a 13-year-old Jarian Elliott, aka J-Rip. He was an affiliate of the Crips who hung around Sevside. J-Rip and another friend of his were targeted in the middle of the day in front of the Angels Cafe. His friend survived, but the young J-Rip was pronounced dead in the hospital. 10 hours or so later, Rajiz, who was on his way to the studio, got in the back of the cab by 2 guys on a scooter. He suffered fatal injuries to his head and chest and died on the spot. One member of the opposition, Nas Roller, who dissed Rajiz, even though he wasn't alive anymore, suffered the same fate as Ra. He was on East 180th Street in the middle of the day when he was targeted and passed away. The same people who were dissing Rajiz's death just a couple of days earlier were now mourning the death of their close friend and fellow member. The violence has reached a point of absurdity, and it seems as if the vicious cycle is long from coming to a close. The question we pose now is whether or not we'll see an end to this gang war anytime soon. Even though the police are doing everything they can in order to catch all the people responsible for orchestrating all the criminal activity, it's a difficult and seemingly never-ending job. The war taking place not only in the Bronx, but other boroughs of NYC and the whole country is far from over. Police can only deal with the effect of this war that's been eating up the Bronx streets, but the real cause of the problem is yet to be dealt with. Truth be told, the reason why there's so much gang violence in the Bronx projects is probably just drill rappers marking their territory and fighting for respect. It's a much deeper problem that won't be solved by catching all the perpetrators of the numerous crimes committed. It's a societal problem, stemming from poor family relationships, poverty, not enough education opportunities, and so forth. Some people get involved in the street life simply because they've never been given any choice. But what y'all think? Will there be an end to this? How can the Bronx and countless other lives be saved? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video, make sure to check this next one out.